Thank you for your question, Senator Hill. Um, I'm going to first start by giving my understanding of our ability to go beyond the federal regulation. And I do think, from what I understand, we do have limitations in terms of actually passing regulation that is in the same domain as an area where PHMSA already has an established requirement. I think there's different things that the commission can do in terms of directing utilities to do different kinds of projects, such as we've done in the pipeline safety and enhancement plan. But there are some limitations of where we cannot preempt the federal government in passing some of these regulations. We do work very closely with PHMSA. We have very regular conversations with them of different recommendations that are coming either through the NTSB or through other industry best practices. And we evaluate them and incorporate them into our work plans where appropriate. So it's going to be an ongoing effort, and we are tracking the 22 recommendations that came out early this year. I believe they had a focus on integrity management, which is been an area of focus for us as well.
I think you've fulfilled some of those recommendations, but there are a few that are not in the rulemaking of the plan at this point. And one is developing a specific risk assessment training. And I understand, at least we heard, there's not much of a training budget that's within the programs. And so I think that's one area that has not been included in anything of those recommendations. The other would be a minimum professional criteria for utility risk management personnel. And a third recommendation, that's recommendation 16 of the PHMSA report, was updated reporting requirements for incidents and inline inspections, which is recommendation 19 from there. So that kind of leads to the other concern. I had legislation a couple of years ago that required the PUC, because of the fact that historically NTSB recommendations would come down PHMSA and they would be completely ignored by the PUC. That legislation requires the PUC to take some action, some formal action, on responding to those recommendations, either adopting them, not adopting them, but at least giving an explanation as to why you're taking those actions. So I hope you would be doing that related to these recommendations as well.
Thank you very much for pointing this out to me. I myself am also a little unclear as a non-lawyer as to the exact ability of the exact extent of our ability to actually set hard and fast standards that are in advance of the federal standards. But I'll go back to this concept of the risk assessment in rate setting is a tool that allows us to actually go further. It's applied to every budget, but budget is policy, and this gives us significant authority over the utilities in their budgets that doesn't depend on those hard and fast standards. And so I think that that's a good place to actually make sure that we apply these. I'll go back to check to see if it's actually being raised in that context. I will say that our ability to gain compliance of utilities where we have the rate setting ability is really different than utilities where we don't have that authority. So for example, in gas and electric versus telephone and other kinds of communications.
Well, it's my understanding that the states can do anything they'd like as long as it's above the minimum standards. So perhaps you could check into that and make sure that that applies. The other question that I'd want to respond to is, I know, and this is related to dig-ins, and there's a perfect picture graph in here that really shows that the lines that you can see in the graph, the green line are dig-ins. That where a dig-in is when a contractor digs into and breaks a pipe and causes could be a devastating problem. In that the report, in a 10-year period, there have been over 500 incidents investigated by the PUC. I have a bill on excavation safety and reached out to the PUC to see what information it had that could be helpful and direct the bill's focus in terms of the type of and how this occurred and some of the other things. And it turns out that the PUC's safety databases are so antiquated that the ability that it can't run the necessary reports, can't get the information, and the PUC zero-based budgeting has identified about 8 high-priority IT projects that have been approved by the Department of Technology, but they haven't been implemented yet. So it appears that inadequate staffing is the main problem, and I understand that you've made requests regularly for more IT positions, but the Department of Finance keeps denying those, and it denies them, it seems like, for that the requests are lacking and non-convincing. So it seems that there needs to be someone at the PUC to work on the presentation of those positions, because I think they're important and I think they're necessary. And so there has to be an ability to convince the Department of Finance and Caltech that they're necessary and important, because I think it's compromising the agency's safety mission at this point in time. So how does, so hopefully you'll be able to look at your budget review process and make sure that these projects get funded somehow.
Yes, Senator Hill. I'd just like a second to respond. As a new executive director, what I'm doing is we're in the process of increasing the staff in our Office of Government Affairs with the idea of bringing on somebody who would serve as an early liaison with Department of Finance, so that we begin to develop a relationship, so it's very clear on what we need and what they need, so that will be done. I also plan myself to make a number of trips up here to Sacramento on that affair, and then as the interim director, I plan that next year's budget would focus on what I think of as core functions. I think the IT is at a place where it's beginning to jeopardize safety in our enforcement activities because it doesn't provide enough support. I think that argument will be more convincing, particularly if myself and Elizabeth make it, which we, I think, plan to do. I also will be focusing on other core functions such as human relations, communications, government affairs, and then also the transportation licensing. These are core things. The commission, is in the paper a lot of times because we are the driving agency behind the new energy policies. But underneath this is a core function, and it has always been a core function of actually railway commissions. I think the first railway commission in Massachusetts was founded after an accident killed a number of people on a train on the way to the beach. So safety has always been a core function, and what I hope to do as the interim is to focus on these core activities to strengthen our core functions so that we have a basis on which we can do these other things.
Great, thank you. I have 2 more areas of focus, if I could, Mr. Chair. And this is on cybersecurity and kind of the capability of that. The PUC seems to take a long time to complete its inspections and accident investigations. Last month's audit of your gas safety branch noted that between 2011 and 2013, it took 7 to 8 months to write up an accident report or an audit report. Best practice in other states is between 15 and 60 days to do that. The state auditor's 2014 review of the transportation branch found that complaint investigations took a similar amount of time, and we've discussed how long electric accident investigations take. It actually gets worse. The gas safety branch audit found a number of other problems, including a lack of consistency, focus, organization, depth, and rigor, adequate record keeping and clear expectations and utility inspection practices, and lack of performance measures, clear expectations, and there's currently no budget for education that we've seen. So I just appreciate that you're aware of that problem. And what concerns me, however, is that despite those deficiencies, your safety action plan calls for some undefined role for the PUC in cybersecurity. And we all recognize the importance of protecting the critical infrastructure. But I was concerned that it may be too important to leave to the PUC based on the history that we've seen. So we passed a bill last year to require the PUC to look at physical activity, physical security, and I had reservations if they were capable to do that, but I'm concerned about cybersecurity. So do you, how will you train the people? How will you add value? And how is that something that you'll be able to work through in the rulemaking?
Actually, it's sort of strange, but in another life, I was a judge dealing with the cybersecurity issue, and Elizaveta Malyshenko wrote a white paper on it. Basically, you're correct. We don't have the capability to adopt, say, a cybersecurity standard. It's partly, though, because it's a moving target. So what the regulatory strategy had been is less reporting or acknowledgement than ensuring that utilities engage in best practices associated with the national cybersecurity efforts. There's basically, I think there's two things underway. There's the contract with the Weapons Lab, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, which is looking at cybersecurity and is participating with the utilities to develop their cybersecurity capabilities. That makes sense. They are the weapons lab. They're subject to cyber threats. We're hoping there'll be a transfer of, as part of that research contract, a transfer of that capability. The other thing is part of the smart grid deployment plans, which I actually was a judge on. We had a cyber section, and what we wanted to do is make each utility report what it was they were doing in terms of the national frameworks and national committees that investigated cybersecurity. So what we're doing is it's not sort of like the pipelines saying we inspect the pipelines have to meet these standards. It's very much a moving target, but we want to make sure that our own utilities are are participating in these organizations that are producing the cybersecurity this day. I believe, well, I'll let Elizabeth talk about the specific plan.
Great, thank you.
Hey, yes, the work product that's in the Safety Action Plan, it's owned by the Policy and Planning Division, and it's really to look at the cybersecurity issue across all of the industries and just issue a informative brief for the commissioners and the public on the state of the issue. So it's not in any way taking away from our enforcement and compliance work. And I think in the beginning of your question, you brought up really important challenges that we faced in the gas safety program. So if I could just take a minute to give you a little bit of an update as to where we are right now since this report by Crow Horwath has been issued. It's really been a priority for me as the deputy director overseeing that program to first clear the backlog. It was really quite colossal when I came in. We, during the St. Bruno investigation, staff was really focused on that. And as the result, we had incidents backlog going back to 2008 and several hundreds of incidents, over 400 incidents were backlogged. And then we were having a similar situations on audits. And it really, once you get yourself into that situation, until you can clear it, you're just continuously buried, and it's very difficult to measure performance or set targets. So I'm happy to report that we managed to clear the backlog by the end of last year. So we have 1 or 2 incidents that are we're just finalizing that were prior to 2014. But we now are at the point where we're starting with a fresh start, and we can actually start having performance measurements in place. We also redesigned our audit and incident investigations processes to make sure that we don't get ourselves into that situation again. We're making our audits or inspections, as they're called by PHMSA, a lot more targeted. So it'll be able to both allow us to go deeper into subject areas and do more thorough job, but also that focus is going to help the engineers to be able to complete those reports in a more timely manner. So we're going to start moving towards the industry best practices in terms of completion. We've also done a similar redesign on the incident investigation side, where we've introduced a 4-tier program, where instead of investigating every incident the same way, we now prioritize them according to their impact and risk levels. And that really allows us to use our staff more efficiently. And then we have set specific goals depending on the severity and the impact of the incident, that, you know, for lower level risk incidents, we can have a much shorter investigation with more specific timeframes, versus when we have really major incidents, it's hard to predict how long they take to investigate, so they fall into different categories. So I believe in some that between really making an effort to clear the backlog and then redesigning the processes that it doesn't doesn't happen again, we're really in much better position now than we were even when Crow Horwath was doing their evaluation.
Very good.
Also, I'd like to mention, she gives me a report each month on the backlogs and statuses. That's part of the monthly report I get. So I'm examining it. It is look good. I can't remember it the way she does, but we do look at it and discuss how we're doing on the backlog and making sure that we keep up.
That's wonderful. One final question, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your indulgence. And this is for Ms. Malashenko and President Picker. Last August, the Safety Subcommittee of the Energy Committee had an electric grid hearing, one in which both of you presented at that hearing. At the end of the hearing, I brought to Ms. Malashenko's attention something that appeared to be a clear Public Records Act violation on the part of the Commission that was related to a safety issue. At the beginning of 2011, a down line led to the electrocution of 3 people in their San Bernardino backyard. The family's attorney made a Public Records Act request of the PUC's accident investigation. That investigation was not completed for almost 2 years. What I had been interested in last August was the subsequent 15 months after the completion of the investigation. Instead of releasing the investigation, the PUC held it while negotiating a settlement with Southern California Edison. If a record is public for one, meaning Southern California Edison got the public records, then it should be, then withholding the record from the family, the PUC effectively took the side of the utility against the grieving family in a civil dispute. I did not ask you to explain that then. Instead, I suggested it and I wanted a discussion in the near future. That discussion hasn't happened. After back and forth emails last year, my office was told by your government affairs staff that they would respond to written questions, but not set up a meeting. This year, my office sent another 2 emails, I have them here, including one earlier this month, to set up a meeting with legal division. Neither received a response. This is not the only example of a lack of responsiveness, but it is, to me, the most egregious. President Picker, you stated in the Assembly Budget Subcommittee that you wanted the PUC to be accountable to the legislature. I'm just looking for that responsiveness. I know that both of you are committed to improving the operations and safety transparency at the PUC. That you've made that commitment. But I have to wonder how successful your staff, you can be, when the staff, as we've seen, is uninterested in discussing the PUC's response to a family getting electrocuted in their own backyard. We can talk about it, but I'll tell you that this also speaks to me to the general lack of responsiveness of our questions through your government affairs office, whether it's regarding execution, the excavation damage issues we've talked about, transportation discussions that we've had on potential legislation to actually make your operations better at the PUC on transportation. So if it's, I don't know, if it's the intent of the PUC to make the legislature backbenchers in this, you've been successful at that through your government affairs office in the responsiveness that we've received.
I take your point and I accept responsibility. I remember the conversation and I'm very sorry that I didn't personally follow up on this. And so let me apologize to you and to the family. and say that we'll get right on it. I do want to say that while I think it's important for us to be as open as we possibly can, that there are very specific issues that have been a challenge to us elsewhere. I don't know if they're the issue here. We're not designed to actually be transparent in general terms. Transparency has a special meaning at the CPUC, and it really means more than anything else that all the information that we use to make decisions is on a written record, and that it's available to all the parties who participate in our proceedings. And there's this very specific process you have to undergo to be a party. I've been wrestling in general, and that probably is one of my distractions, to understand why it's sometimes hard for us to provide responses to California Public Records Act requests. And it took me a while, and it's just a sign of my limitation. But I finally understood what people were talking to me about with Public Utilities Code 583. 1953, the legislature adopted a requirement that the PUC hold confidential all filings from utilities that were presented to us, and there's a misdemeanor penalty for employees who inadvertently disclose those or intentionally disclose those. We have a process that we can undergo to clear those documents for release, but in general, I like to point this out because it took me a while to figure it out. This is one of those things that everybody tends to take for granted. It does directly conflict with the requirements of the California Public Records Act, which actually states that any document in a government agency is a public record unless it's deemed by review to be confidential business information or confidential information. So we have this kind of collar at the same time that we need to actually meet these other standards. And I'm still trying to understand what the best direction is that the legislature is setting for us in terms of these other requests that we're getting. I don't know that it's directly relevant here, but again, I think that does tend to set our culture. And I hope that at some point we can get clarity from the legislature.
I think that, and I appreciate that and the intention to do that. I guess the concern is in the responsiveness. You know, I would think if when the legislature, and based on your comments at the subcommittee, if we send emails, it'd be nice to get a response from somebody rather than just ignored.
And my deep apologies to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your indulgence in that.
I'd like to add my apology as well. My vision of the organization is one that is reports and is responsive to the legislature. That is not widely shared throughout the whole culture. It is something that we're working on.
Thank you, and I appreciate you being here today and sharing those plans. It sounds hopeful. We're going to continue to work with you, and we'll continue to have hearings. We will schedule one next year around the normal time frame to hear updates, and hopefully you'll continue to make progress in these areas.
One thing we intend to do is to have a safety en banc later this year, and we'll call a variety of utility executives before us to answer questions about the progress they're making in safety above and beyond our hard and fast requirements. I invite you to give us questions and to share with us your thoughts on what we should focus on. I think that that's an important way where we can begin to measure over time progress and to hold the senior executives accountable in public to the kinds of discussions we're having here. And so I just want to put you on notice about that.
And when do we have, I mean, when is that taking place?
I believe it's
We're gonna take you up on your offer.
October
We do have
21st.
additional questions we'd like to follow up with you on.
I'm not sure if the date has been scheduled, but we're shooting for October, early November timeframe.
Okay.
I'd also like to thank the committee staff who have offered actually to at some point when the legislative cycle is slower, to just meet with our senior people to explain the role of the oversight and how they exercise it. I think one of the things that I'm hoping to do is introduce people who are affected by our decisions, both in the oversight agencies and local government, so that people have a vision of the many different publics we serve. So
Thank you. And I appreciate you've been in my office so often, and Ms. Sadler's been in our office very often this year as well, so appreciate that contact and that connection, and we'll continue to communicate with you and send you our questions. And thank you very much for being here today, and thanks to the public. We're going to go to public comment now, and we'll hear some comment from them.
You want us to clear out?
Yeah, you can go ahead and sit down.
Thanks.
Is that microphone available to people from the public to speak? And we'd like you to state your name and give us a brief 1-minute comment, if you would, please.
Mr. Chairman and members, Scott Wetch on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees. The Q represents 35,000 men and women, many of which, if not a majority of, put their lives on the line, literally, every single day, maintaining the gas and electrical and nuclear infrastructure of the state's regulated utilities. While there's many positive things going on at the PUC, which I'm going to mention, I've got to say that I'm quite disappointed by the last panel's testimony. Not once in their testimony was there any reference to workforce preparedness, training of workers, the inherent danger of the work that the 35,000 workers are out there performing. Each and every year, we lose brothers and sisters. I think last year we had 5 deaths. So for the executive director and the president of the commission to provide this committee with a presentation and not speak to that, I'm very glad that the PUC staff is so well trained. It must be the safest place in California. But I would like to see an equal amount of dedication and attention to the workforce availability and preparedness. In that regard, we have a ticking time bomb. The single biggest factor, and parenthetically, I would just say that even more so than the public, the people who are at risk of significant injury and death every day are the men and women who I represent, who are out there working with this infrastructure in very dangerous settings. We have a ticking time bomb in regards to a well-trained and adequate workforce. We have, and that frankly was a quote from the Edison general rate case. That was their words, not mine. I'll give you an example. The single biggest factor in potential accidents, both to the worker, but also mistakes made in the work processes that can lead to incidents that we've seen, is having a inadequately trained and prepared workforce. So we have an aging workforce, which should have been one of the primary issues I would thought that the commission would have talked about today in regard to safety. PG&E in their last general rate case identified that they'd have 2,456 electrical workers of retirement age in 2013. These are the people who go out in the middle of the storms, who maintain our systems.
Can you wrap up your comments?
That number jumps to 3,515 in 2016. We have serious issues regarding confined spaces and the dangers that leads to. We have many different workforce issues that when this committee looks at safety in future hearings, I hope will be a part of it. The one thing I want to say that I think is the single biggest improvement on safety in the last decade or more at the PUC is President Picker's creation of the RAMP program, the Risk Assessment Mitigation Program. Because why that is going to be so crucial, and we'll wrap this up, Mr. Chairman, is that it integrates discussions about safety and allocation of resources in the general rate case. And we think that that's going to be extremely important. And so we applaud the commission for taking that monumental step. Thank you.
Please state your name.
Yes, my name is Rochelle Becker, excuse me, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. And I am a safety advocate who participates before the Public Utilities Commission. I have since 1984.
Back away from the mic a little.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Also, my voice isn't clear, sorry. we are safety advocates, but we work on nuclear issues. Nuclear issues are preempted by the federal government. But as we've heard, when we want to do something that's more safe than what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission may put forward, we're able to do that. And that's our position before the Public Utilities Commission. We have actually never met a safety advocate at the PUC. I've never had anyone at the Public Utilities Commission come up to me and say, I work on safety, can I help you with your case? We are now represented by former Energy Commissioner John Giesman in our proceedings, which certainly has raised the bar as far as our work. But still, when we go to talk about safety issues in a nuclear power plant, we're often told by the Public Utilities Commission that they're preempted from talking about that. But we have to pay for that safety, and we want to know what safety costs and if this is the wisest investment. And that is why our participation is vital before the Public Utilities Commission. I've also been the president of TURN. My attorney has also been the president of TURN. We understand ratepayer issues. I live in San Luis Obispo. I have a second home in San Diego. I live downwind of both nuclear power plants. Those communities have a hard time getting to the Public Utilities Commission to make their safety concerns heard. We are heartened by the fact that they're willing to start talking about this. But recently, PG&E has handed out to every member of this building their new seismic report. Their new seismic report, in which they say they are safe from a 10,000-year earthquake, is not agreed to by the independent peer review panel set up by legislation in this body, AB 1632, which created an independent peer review panel made up of the Energy Commission, the Coastal Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, California Safety Survey, Geologic Survey, and a supervisor from our community who happens to also be a PhD seismologist. They disagree with PG&E's seismic report, but the deciding body can be the PUC in this case, not only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And if we think an accident and a gas line is tragic, I can't imagine what we could call an accident and an aging nuclear power plant sitting on a seismically active coast.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your time.
coming. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a wonderful day.